What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2022 Lexus NX 450h Plus. So about this all new next generation version of the NX. Well, it's on the new TNGA platform here that underpins many other new Lexus and Toyota models. And for the new NX here, they definitely took an evolutionary approach to the styling changes here. So, it definitely does look different than the old one. And I think it's a really nice improvement. It kind of built on the good looks of the recent IS350 refresh. And I also like how they actually didn't really change the dimensions much. So this is actually the smallest in its luxury compact segment now, which is kind of refreshing with everything else getting larger and larger. If you're someone who appreciates a smaller compact luxury SUV and you don't want to go down to something tiny, I think this really is a nice happy medium size-wise. Coming down to the sides here, you also have these nice 20-inch wheels, which are pretty bright on this one, but you can also get some darker wheels here. And I also really like the side profile of the new NX. I think actually, especially the rear three-quarters shot kind of looks a lot more sporty than the past generation and really has like these muscular shoulders there to the back, and those lines really are sharp that crease into those taillights. And then going out to the back there, you have those really nice full-length LED taillights there in the back that look great. You also have the new Lexus badge spelled out there, which is a cool touch. And just more good looks out back there. And I just like how it even kind of comes a little bit of a rounded point there with the rear hatch, and it's not just flat back there. There's some curvature and some really interesting lines here on the new NX. And so overall, I think they did a really nice job upgrading the styling here without doing something crazy that's going to upset people or turn people away. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The NX here still uses the tried and true Lexus key, but it's still a really nice key with a little bit of metal here and a little bit of like a vinyl feeling on the front. Just a couple buttons there on the back, nothing unique here for the 450 version either, but it is keyless access, keyless entry, push button start, of course. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button or power button, and it starts right up. And of course here for hybrid and plug-in hybrid versions of the NX, whenever you turn it on, it's just going to boot everything up, but you won't actually have the engine kick on a lot of times. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the NX, my wife and I already did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. But overall, it's a huge difference from the old NX for sure, and it's the first application of this brand new Lexus touchscreen, which is massive and is really cool. And so yeah, but I mean overall, everything else here is still typical Lexus, very nice feeling inside. Definitely feels worthy of its price tag. All right, so setting off here in the NX 450h Plus. Well, the first thing you'll notice is that you'll be able to drive on just electricity alone here. It's one of the great things with the plug-in hybrid version. So I've only managed to charge up 4 miles here because it was delivered without any kind of charge in it, and I just used the gas engine to charge it a few miles here just to demonstrate this electric thing. But I will be charging it throughout the week up to a full battery, and so whenever I will have it topped off, you can get 37 miles of all EV range here with a 450h Plus version. And so anyway, I mean, just rolling here through a park though at under 25 miles an hour, nice and quiet. You just hear it emits a little sound to warn pedestrians you're coming, but that's really all you hear. You hear a little bit of the electric motors working sometimes, but otherwise, it's just a very nice, very quiet, refined vehicle. Being on this new TNGA platform, it means you have a lot of improvements to the refinement, the smoothness, the ride quality, all that type of stuff. It's nice and quiet in here too, especially not having the engine running here. And the brake pedal is also nice and pretty normal feeling. It's a little grabby right towards the very end, but very easy to get used to if you're not someone that's used to driving hybrids or electric vehicles or anything like that. But good amount of punch here just whenever you're rolling around. That is the really great thing I loved with the RAV4 Prime, which has a lot in common with this vehicle. So, with that, it was a very strong electric motor, so you're able to do even full-blown highway merges with just electric power alone, and it was punchy enough for that. And this is the one thing that really separates this plug-in hybrid setup from a lot of the competitors, which are much weaker, have much smaller ranges for the EV range. This is, real good range. You can do a lot of commuting on electricity alone and actually, be able to leave it in that electric mode and have that good power. Throttle response is also nice and responsive, especially with the immediate response to the electric motor. It feels nice and punchy as well. But anyway, so I'll talk more about the battery and all that in a minute, but first I want to put it up into the sport mode. If you were in an F Sport model, you would have a Sport Plus mode here, but this one only is in sport mode here for the non-F Sport version. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. All right, so the EV motor was staying in that EV mode you can't have it set up for the different modes. I guess I must have had it in just the EV dedicated mode. So it'll let you floor it and will not turn on that gas engine. But I mean, that was still a pretty impressive acceleration, just considering that was just the electric motors alone. I mean, like I said, lots of punch, way more than the XC60 or the Q5 can offer. And anyway, yeah, good amount of punch though, just the EV setup here. So the full thing all combined is, you know, a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, naturally aspirated. It does about 181 horsepower on its own, but combined with the electric motors here, you get a total of about 302 horsepower. There was no torque figures given. Toyota doesn't really like giving torque figures for their hybrids and stuff, but it's very punchy feeling. And so, I mean, they're saying it's going to have about a 6 second 0 to 60 time is what Lexus officially claims. Motor Trend got a 5.5 second 0 to 60. So either way you cut it, I mean, that's still going to be very solid performance. Again, that will be with the gas engine assisting you. Just with the EV thing, I would say that it's, you know, maybe a mid 7 second 0 to 60 or something though. I mean, it still is very punchy though, even just with that EV setup, considering it really is only contributing roughly about 120 horsepower. It gets up and moves this thing pretty well, surprisingly. But we'll go ahead and put it into the auto mode. And so in this mode here, again, in sport mode, we'll do an acceleration here, see how it does this time. Okay, so now gas engine comes on. Yeah, and gets up and moves really nicely with that gas engine. It's kind of an interesting sensation, much like the Prime, where you have the electric motor kicking in first, and then the gas engine does kick in, but it doesn't make peak power at 0 RPM. So that engine then has to rev up, and that kind of carries you the rest of the way into those higher speeds. But really a great setup. And you can really tell, so especially whenever the gas engine is working with that EV motor, I mean, the front nose really lifts up, and it feels fast. It feels really, really nice. And yeah, I really like that. Anyway, we're cutting up some corners here, and let's see how the 450h Plus handles. We're on these 20-inch Bridgestone all-season tires, and it feels pretty good. So it's a little more leany. It feels a tiny bit top heavy, but still very flat. And of course, if you have the F Sport, that also has adaptive dampers, which will help to give you a better ride, but this one does not have the adaptive dampers here. It's a little leany. You know, it doesn't have the handling confidence that you get from some of the best handling vehicles in this segment that aren't plug-in hybrid, admittedly. So stuff like the Acura RDX, for example, much, much better handling than this still. At least, you know, again, it's not really fair because this isn't the best handling version, but just have to put it out there that yeah, handling isn't bad, but you can tell they clearly set this up for, you know, just someone who wants a comfortable ride. And that they did a great job with. And, you know, I mean, very few people are actually enthusiasts that buy NXs. So, you know, for the masses, this is going to be exactly what they want and need. And I gotta say, the ride is really nice and smooth. This is a little bit of a rougher road and still feels really nice and smooth. Soaks up all the bumps really nicely as well. We'll hit some more intense potholes in a little bit. And let's do another acceleration here with the gas engine working this time. Yeah, it really moves up that nose. Very strong acceleration. Yeah, this thing feels great. And it's also impressive that 0 to 60 time, by the way, is basically the same as a RAV4 Prime. So even though you have the extra weight here of the NX, it's about 150 to 200 pounds heavier than a RAV4 Prime. But even with that extra weight, you know, to still have the same acceleration performance is pretty impressive. But speaking of that battery pack, though, that's one other thing I want to mention a little bit more about. So it is different than the RAV4 Prime. So the RAV4 Prime, it has like the typical hybrid type battery, and then it also has a separate battery for the plug-in component. The NX is different, where it doesn't have that differentiation. It just has one bigger battery that handles both the regular hybrid and the full EV propulsion together. And so basically what that means is that you know, Lexus says that you can still drive around just with the hybrid's functions working totally, even if you've completely depleted the battery. So it will always keep enough electric reserve in the battery there, so you can still drive around as a hybrid here, even if, you know, you run out of electric range. So it's kind of cool that it just intelligently manages that battery and always keeps a little bit in reserve there. And so that means that you always have, you know, the ability to just, you know, still get pretty good fuel economy and good efficiency, even whenever you're doing that low speed inching up and stuff, even with a fully depleted battery. So, you know, this thing's gonna really, you know, try and maximize your efficiency And it's really cool that it does that. I mean, the RAV4 Prime was also very good with that though too, so it's just kind of an interesting change. I'm not sure exactly why they decided to do that change, but one other thing that's interesting about the changes between these two is that in here you have a coolant system for the battery. I'm assuming because it's maybe a little bit of a larger battery. You don't get a coolant system for the RAV4 Prime's batteries, and so supposedly that coolant system will allow you to have better performance in hotter climates. So, you know, you might have a little bit better battery performance in the NX here over the Prime if you're, you know, cross-shopping the two. But I think that, you know, from a handling standpoint and stuff, you definitely feel the extra weight. But, you know, I'd say they actually handle fairly similarly. And if you do want the best handling NX, though, and you still want some decent efficiency, you can save a lot of weight by going for a regular hybrid version of the NX. And compared to a regular NX, for example, this is about 450 pounds heavier, so it is a big weight gain for all those extra batteries and stuff. And so the curb weight here for the NX 450h Plus is 4,444 pounds is what Motor Trend got in their testing. So you definitely can feel that weight. I'd say that feels pretty accurate to the seat of the pants kind of feeling you get. But again, a lot of that I think is really down to just the softer setup they have here, especially without the F-Sport package. And we've been hitting a couple of potholes here in the NX, and it still is a really nice, smooth ride. It really does a good job of absorbing all those bumps. I'd be curious to try out the F-Sport's adaptive dampers to see if they soften things up even a little bit more. But in past Lexus products, the adaptive dampers haven't made a wild difference. So I'm not expecting any kind of huge difference, you know, with those. That's mostly going to be probably towards just making it a little bit stiffer for better handling. But yeah, I mean, it still just drives very, very nicely. And so if you're someone who doesn't need the whole sporty aspect, you know, I think that you're just going to really enjoy just cruising around in this thing. And even that was the biggest pothole I just hit there, and it was, you know, just a minor little bump here for the NX. So a very nice, smooth, luxurious ride here in the NX. And now we're out on the highway here in the NX, and it's a really nice cruiser out here as well. You know, there's some road noise here, but it's not too bad. And I also have the adaptive cruise control system on, and so that also has the lane trace assist, and so it's gently going around these corners here. And it doesn't give me too much steering assist or anything, but it does. It's just very subtle with the steering inputs and stuff, so that it's not all over the place or anything. And I'm liking it so far, but I'll continue to test it here on a few more corners. So around a couple more corners here, it continues to do a really good job of tracing the lanes, so it's doing pretty good. I'll continue to test that during my week of driving here at the NX and see how it does. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the system. It's pretty assertive with its steering and is a little more active than past Toyota and Lexus systems, which have been a little more passive. This is a little more hands-on with, you know, making those steering adjustments for you, but you still have to, of course, have your hands on the wheel the whole time. Other stuff though, safety tech-wise here, it's loaded with safety tech here in the NX, especially for the 450h Plus version, which is pretty much fully loaded. So you'll have the rear cross traffic alert, you have blind spot monitoring, but it even has like a front cross traffic alert, which is interesting because, you know, if you're at a complete stop and there's cars passing in front of you, if you start going after that car has passed, it still is giving me alerts that like, oh, there's a car passing in front of you, you shouldn't accelerate, but like clearly the car's out of my way, but it's just like, unless there's like no one around, it seems like it likes alerting you. So I think they might need a little more fine tuning with that system, but everything else here has been working really well so far. Adaptive cruise has been very smooth with slowing down for cars in front of me and stuff. And so yeah, I'm pretty impressed with all that, but I will continue to test that out here over the course of the week as well. But thanks to Lexus, I will have this vehicle for an entire week, so I'm going to drive all over the place. Then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy and efficiency numbers, and, you know, talking more about how it was to drive around in EV mode, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and how it compares to its competition. All right, so I've been driving the NX 450h Plus for a week now, and I've really enjoyed my time in it. It's a very nice, soft, comfortable thing. I think personally, I would probably prefer the handling in the F-Sport version better. So, you know, obviously that probably goes without saying, but if you're someone who's more enthusiast oriented, definitely, you know, pay the extra money for the F-Sport version, get those adaptive dampers, and have slightly better handling. Because this, there are still a lot of times where, even in usual SUVs, I feel like this has lower limits than some of those do, where I was just, you know, having to be a little bit slower around corners and stuff because I just felt it was a little bit too leany. And also there's actually a couple of times where traction control would actually kick in, or I could feel it just starting to intervene. So there's still, you know, very rear biased setup here with this all-wheel drive system, which is kind of interesting because the rear motor is not very powerful. But I just feel like the vehicle, it's trying to feel playful, but it sometimes sometimes just feels a little not very reassuring, I guess is the best way to put it. And so it doesn't feel super secure all the time. And so I found myself driving this thing a little bit less sportingly than I usually would with some of the other vehicles whenever I'm going around my normal back roads and stuff like that. And in addition to that, I did notice that as the week went on, the brakes, I started to dislike the brakes a little bit more. Whenever I first hopped in this, they seemed okay to me and they weren't too tricky, but I think, now that I've been doing more and more electric driving here in this vehicle, it still is a little inconsistent with the catch point for the brake. So I just still was a little bit second guessing myself sometimes whenever I was using the brakes, as far as how much I needed to do the braking I wanted to do smoothly. And so I it still wasn't totally smooth with the braking here in this vehicle after, a week of driving around. I also noticed whenever, you're just being quiet and you're just rolling around just in that electric mode, there is a little bit of a higher pitched sound that is emitted, and it's a little bit beyond just the normal, like whenever you first roll in a hybrid, you kind of hear a little sound like that. But this just continued to have some of those sounds, even up at some higher speeds. And so it just meant that it just was a little bit strange to always be hearing that. So I definitely wanted to listen to the music more in this vehicle, which is unfortunate because you can't get the Mark Levinson system here on the 450h Plus. I think you can on the regular hybrids. But, so that was just another weird thing. One other last little weird complaint was that you have these paddle shifters here, which are really cool looking, feel great, but they're kind of strange with the way they work, where even whenever you're in fully electric mode, they started to do some regen for me. So it was kind of like other electric vehicles where you can kind of play with the regeneration, with the regen braking. But then whenever I did one paddle too many, then it actually just kicked on the engine, and then the engine just wouldn't turn off for several minutes. I guess once you turn it on, it wants it to kind of do a little bit of a warm up before it turns off, maybe for reliability reasons and stuff. Totally understandable, but it's kind of strange. I still don't understand exactly how these paddle shifters work in the 450h Plus as far as what does what and why it does what it does. But it's also impressive though to note that, speaking of the electric driving, is that almost all of my driving was electric only here in this vehicle for the week. Honestly, the most driving I did was whenever you saw previously in the first half of the review driving, after I had been doing my accelerations and stuff. But the entire rest of the week I was driving around in electric mode. And so 37 miles of electric range, I just never drove more than 37 miles a day, so I just didn't need to ever use the gas engine. And that's really the powerful thing about these plug-in hybrids that have good range like this does, and like the Toyota RAV4 Prime, is that you might hardly ever even need the gas engine, and that saves you a ton of money. And it's just great that it has that much range. And I think that's really one of the huge things this has over its really only two rivals, from Audi and from Volvo. They do way less electric range, and so I think that that's really the biggest thing. Is I love just being able to just drive around and pretend like this is an electric car all week, and is doing a very good job of doing that. Speaking of my electric driving though, my average efficiency here with the electric motors was 2.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which I also have to say is fairly impressive. It's not as high as like the 3 to 3.5 miles per kilowatt that I get in dedicated electric vehicles, but also this is the winter time, I have to mention here, so that's going to hurt efficiency like it does in any electric vehicle. And as a result, by the way, I think the closest I got to draining the battery during a day of driving, it was working out that I had about 30 miles of electric range in practice in the winter time. Obviously, that range is less important in a plug-in hybrid because you always have the gas engine to back you up if you need it, but just thought it was worth mentioning that, in colder temps, I was getting about maybe 30 miles of electric range in reality. Now, it was just because it was telling me I had 6 miles left after 24 miles of driving, so it kind of was depleting itself a little bit faster than I was expecting. But still, again, not a big deal in a plug-in hybrid, and I still think that's still pretty good efficiency considering this is dragging around a gas engine and all the weight and all the luxury here that this has, and to have the strong power it still has with the electric motors, to be getting 2.2 miles per kilowatt hour, I'm actually pretty happy with that, honestly. Also, speaking of charging, it charged up every night flawlessly. It charges really fast even on my slow I just was doing a normal house current plug, 120 volts, and it's still I'm plugging in at like 10 o'clock every night. It'd be topped off, ready to go the next morning. And you know, so very easy to keep up with that battery, even if you don't have a dedicated, you know, fast charger there right there in your garage. The only other thing that regarding charging that I didn't love was that whenever you plug it in, the only thing that confirms to you that the vehicle is actually charging is that there's a little green light by the charge door, and there's also a little green light on the charge cable. But I believe the RAV4 Prime and basically anything else, whenever you plug it in on the gauge cluster here, it will turn on and tell you it's charging and say how many hours until it's done charging. There was none of that here in the Lexus. There was no indication, there was no info as far as what it was doing charging wise, and I was kind of surprised to see that. Another strange head scratcher thing is that I could not for the life of me figure out how to do a normal trip computer for my fuel economy. Like, I was able to go in, there's a vehicle settings thing in here, and that'll show you your history, but it only shows you your history for like the past couple of days, but it doesn't combine those figures, and it continues to reset itself over and over again. So if you're on a long, you know, multi-day trip or something, it's like hard to automatically log your fuel economy and stuff like that. I could be missing something, but I even dug out the owner's manual and tried to figure it out. I could not figure out how to just do a normal trip computer here in this infotainment system. So a little bit strange there. The last thing to mention here, though, is the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So these start around $57,500. They basically come pretty well equipped. There's only a luxury trim, and then there's the F-Sport Performance one, and they basically have very similar equipment levels. It's just that the F-Sport version gives you the adaptive dampers and the slightly unique styling, little unique touches. And when you compare this to its two competitors, the Audi Q5 that has the plug-in hybrid variant, the 55 version of those with less electric range, you know, this is actually about $7,000 cheaper. It's also about $7,000 cheaper than the Volvo XC60 T8, which also has a lot less range and just isn't quite as good from a plug-in hybrid standpoint either. Now, they are working on an improvement here in the 2022 year for the Volvo XC60, so it could get better range and stuff here going forward. But as of right now, of me filming this has them both beat easily on range. Now, both of those do have more horsepower, so those you know, have much stronger engines, and so they're going to be faster in a straight line. Do you care in a vehicle like this? You know, if you're someone who just wants something really efficient and luxurious, you know, still having 300 horsepower is going to be plenty, and I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about only having 300 horsepower here in, you know, a luxury crossover. So I think that, you know, Audi and Volvo are kind of missing the point here. I mean, there are some people that maybe want a ton of power, but I think that this kind of is a sweet spot of what realistic buyers of plug-in hybrids are happy with power-wise, and giving them the better efficiency and everything instead, I think, is definitely the way to go. So I think that Lexus was very smart with the way they set this up. The only thing that I don't know if it's just kind of a production thing, I'm not sure why, but for some reason this is kind of decontented over like a loaded up version of a regular hybrid NX. A comparable NX hybrid would cost about $53,000 versus this vehicle's as tested price of about $60,000. And so, you know, I think that honestly, comparing this to the regular hybrid NX, you know, since you do get the $7,500 tax credit with this vehicle, again, that depends on the person, but if you qualify for that tax credit, you know, that kind of nullifies the premium here for the plug-in hybrid, and then you're basically getting this for even a few $1,000s less than the regular hybrid NX. So I think from that standpoint, it certainly makes sense to go for the plug-in hybrid if the tax thing works out for you. But it's just kind of crazy that in the regular hybrid, you're able to get like a panoramic roof, which is not an option currently here in the NX 450h Plus. You also can't get the Mark Levinson stereo for some reason here in this, which is available, and it's a big difference because it's 17 speakers versus 10 speakers here in this setup. And so, you know, there are some decontenting things, and it's kind of strange that that's the case. And the regular hybrid also does get slightly better fuel economy whenever you are using the gas engine. So whenever you're using the gas engine in this, the EPA rates this at 36 mpg combined. You're going to be getting 39 mpg combined in the regular hybrid version of the NX. But obviously the huge caveat to that is that, you know, again, you get 37 miles of range here in this every single day, you know, if you're plugging it in every night. And so, you know, that's going to really help with your fuel savings, you know, even if you are getting 3 mpg worse once that gas engine does kick in. It really depends on, I guess, how much driving you're doing, but I think for most people, you know, this is going to definitely be the much more efficient option as far as that goes. And as far as the MPGe rating, you know, for the electric component and stuff, it does get 84 MPGe, which is about 10 less than the RAV4 Prime. So you're definitely paying an efficiency penalty for the extra luxury here of of this, which goes without saying, because again, it's heavier and stuff. That's an obvious thing, but it's just, you know, one thing to mention there. If you do want the most efficient plug-in hybrid, you don't care about the luxury thing, you know, the RAV4 Prime still has it beat, I think, as far as, you know, just having a little bit more efficiency, and also the better value proposition, of course, of, you know, having the same basic performance as this, even better range, without having 42 miles of electric range and stuff, all for, you know, about 50 grand fully loaded. And by the way, the RAV4 Prime does give you a panoramic roof in that fully loaded version, which again, strangely, you cannot get here in this. So anyway, overall, I still really like the NX 450h Plus. I think, you know, the F-Sport version would have allowed me to enjoy it a little bit more as far as the handling aspect goes, but otherwise, it's a really nice, comfortable thing to cruise around in, and I think that's definitely the best plug-in hybrid, and probably the best version of the NX. I have not driven the other ones, but considering it has the most power, the best efficiency, you know, I just think the 450 is really the one to get if, you know, you can justify the price premium, which even with the tax credit, you know, you are buying or leasing a vehicle that's more expensive and, you know, therefore having a higher payment and stuff. So that'll just come down to the individual person. But I just got to say that I think that the 450 is a really impressive package here, just like how the RAV4 Prime is definitely my favorite version of the RAV4. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the NX 450h Plus. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me here with the NX 450 to review for you guys today. It just wanted to do a rear wheel burnout. That was hilarious. Yeah, that's funny the way every once in a while there's a disconnect with that front motor and the rear motor. Kind of funny. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the NX 450h Plus in the comments below. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.